So in this episode, we will get to know statutes and public laws. And yes, you read that right, using the force for legal research. Our story on statutes, kind of like Star Wars, starts in the middle of the story. So in essence, we start with episodes 4 and 5. And our story is actually right in the middle of the legislative process. So we start with a piece of legislation already signed by the president that has become law. All grown up like Luke Skywalker, except the name of our hero is public law. We will see how our hero developed from a bill into a law in the prequel of our story, episodes 1 through 3, when we talk about legislative history later on in the semester. And we'll see what happens later on to our hero, sort of, it's a little bit loosely translated, when we talk about administrative law. So let's get to know our hero a little bit better. So here is our hero, Public Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. It turns out the full name of our hero, public law, is Public Law 93406. Understanding what those numbers mean and how they got assigned will help you a great deal in understanding how to do research. So let's take a closer look at what those numbers mean. So here on Congress.gov, we are looking at the public laws for the 114th Congress. The 114th Congress occurred between 2015 and 2016. A Congress lasts 2 years. The reason for that is that the House of Representatives sits for 2 years. And basically, each 2-year period is assigned a number since the very beginning. You can get a sense of that here as the Congress is going back. So the 114th Congress, if you do the math, winds up starting in 2015. So looking at the public laws listed here, we now know that the 114 means the 114th Congress. So all this number means is that this particular public law was enacted in Congress number 114, and it was the 329th law enacted in the 114th Congress. So looking at this one, again, this is the 328th law enacted in the 114th Congress. To get a better understanding of Congresses, let's take a look at this historical list of Congresses. So as you might guess, the very first Congress started in 1789 after the Constitution was enacted, and as we said, Congress lasts 2 years. So the second Congress would start 2 years later in 1791. Remember, our hero is Public Law 93406, so from that we can now figure out that our hero was enacted in the 93rd Congress, which started in 1973 and ended in 1974. And down here, as we saw, the 14th Congress started in 2015 and 2016. So going back to take a look at our hero, sure enough, Public 93-406, we know was enacted in the 93rd Congress, and as we saw, that happened between 1973 and 74, and our public law was enacted in 1974. Another thing we can learn by looking at our hero is where our hero lives, or what planet our hero lives on. And we do that, we see that up here at top, where we see that our hero lives in volume 88 of the Statutes at Large, abbreviated as STAT, and within volume 88 of Statutes at Large, our hero starts on page 829. So let's take a closer look at the planet on which our hero lives on. Here's the Statutes at Large, and we see what the volume would look like on the shelf, and here we see the title page of volume 88 of the volume in which our hero lives, and sure enough it tells us that in this volume we see public laws between 93-446 and 93-446, and sure enough 93-406 is between those two, so our hero 93-406 lives in this volume. Another planet you'll find our hero on is called USCAN, or United States Code Congressional and Administrative News. And don't worry, nobody's going to ask you to remember that or even say it. But you do want to remember USCAN, and the reason for that is you will find citations to USCAN both in cases and in law review articles. So as we can see here, you can see what the volume would look like on the shelf, as well as we can see the first page of our HERO 93-406 and see what the different sections are. And sure enough, our HERO in USCAN looks just like our HERO does in Statutes at Large as we scroll down and we see the different sections listed. Okay, so our HERO was enacted in 1974. As you can imagine, our HERO, just like Luke, will get older and more experienced and may change significantly and many times over the years. For our HERO, those changes are known as amendments. So as you can imagine, since 1974, that's a lot of years. We don't want to have to check through all the amendments that happened since 1974 until today, because of course we need to know what the law is for our client today and how it applies to her today. So starting from 1974 and trying to find all those public laws that might have amended ERISA since then would take a whole lot of work. What we want to see is a resource where we can see the section, our section of ERISA, to see what that law looks like as it currently exists today. And this is where we get the force. And the force with regard to statutory research means codification. So just like Luke learned the force from Yoda, we can learn what the law is today from the United States Code. Now, what a code is essentially the sections of our HERO, the public law, get separated out into different subjects and put in a subject arranged resource that is continually updated. And that subject arranged resource that is continually updated is the U.S. Code. So let's get to know the U.S. Code a little bit better, and we will first look at it as it appears on Lexis. So here on Lexis, we're looking at the United States Code, and we are looking at the always useful table of contents. So we can see the different subjects that were created in the U.S. Code. So for instance, there's the Congress subject, and in the U.S. Code, subjects are called titles. So we can see that the agriculture subject is in Title 7, the aliens and nationalities subjects in Title 8. The crimes and criminal procedure subject is in Title 18, and scrolling a bit further, the title we're interested in, the labor subject, is in Title 29. Now remember, we got that citation from our ever useful secondary sources that referred us to 29 USCA 1144. So looking at our labor title, there are subdivisions called chapters. And sure enough, there's a chapter for Employee Retirement Income Security for ERISA, and that has further subsections. And finally, we see the subsection of Administration and Enforcement, and we see the sections within that. And sure enough, there is 1144, our section on preemption with regard to ERISA. Now, as always, a table of contents is supremely useful, so we might want to look around and see if there are any other sections within our area that looks useful. So possibly civil enforcement, maybe administration or regulations. These are all sections we might want to check out, as well as looking at the section we have referenced, 1144. So let's take a closer look at what 1144 looks like in the U.S. Code on Lexis. And one interesting thing to point out, if we scroll down to the bottom here, is the history, because sure enough, we see that our section 1144 was enacted in 1974 originally by our HERO Public Law 93-406. We also see in history, as we suspected, all these different amendments that updated or changed our HERO Public Law 93-406 and affected our particular section 1144. We certainly would not have wanted to first identify and then have to track down all these public laws and figure out how they changed our section until we got to the last one. So an annotated code is definitely the force to help us do research. To understand codification a little bit better, let's take a look at a table known as Table 3 tool. We will look into how you find this as well as how to use it in class in more detail, but for now let's just see how useful it is. So we can see our hero, Public Law 93406, as we already know, lives on the planet Volume 88, Statutes at Large. And we can also see the different sections that we scrolled quickly through. You'll see those sections of the public law, our hero 93406, we can see where those sections wound up in the United States Code. So, for instance, if we look at Section 2 of our hero, Public Law 93406, we go across and we find out that it is in Title 29 of the U.S. Code and Section 1001 of Title 29 of the U.S. Code. Similarly, Section 3 in Title 29, Section 1002 of the U.S. Code. Now we can see also, if we go down a few more sections, here's a section, part of Section 111, this subsection of our hero 93406, actually got put into a different title in Title 18. Remember, that was Crimes and Criminal Procedure, and within Title 18 of the U.S. Code, that section of the Act wound up in Section 664. If we're curious where our section, 29 U.S.C. 1144, we can just scroll down till we find 1144, and sure enough, we find out that our U.S. Code section 29 U.S. Code 1144 was originally enacted by Section 514 of our hero, Public Law 93406. One thing you'll notice looking at this chart is that the numbers of the sections of the public law, our hero 93406, are totally different than the section numbers that they get assigned when they wind up in the different titles in the code. And the way you translate between sections of the Act to sections of the code is this Table 3 tool that we're looking at now. Okay, so let's take a look at our section in the U.S. Code in our codification. And here's what it looks like on Lexis. And what we are looking at Lexis, and here's what it looks like on Westlaw, kind of the same. The screen looks a little bit different. And here's what it looks like on Bloomberg. All of these different codes online are annotated codes, and we will be discussing a lot in the next few classes why an annotated code is absolutely your very best friend for doing statutory research. So you can see here some of the features of the annotated codes, and I should mention that the annotated codes on Lexis and Westlaw also appear in print. But these features of the annotated code, you'll get a quick introduction here, will help you tremendously in not only researching your issue or your section, but understanding and interpreting. So we see some of the features here across these tabs on Westlaw. We see the annotated features here in the drop down on Lexis. And as I mentioned, the annotated code in Bloomberg isn't quite as powerful, but there is some additional help for you on Bloomberg, and here you can see the feature here. So as I said, we will be talking a great deal more about the annotated code, how to use it, why it truly is your very best friend for doing statutory research. So as we can see, to be continued.